And thank you very much, Dr. Bala, for this warm introduction. It's a privilege for me to be speaking along with Professor Subramaniam, who is such a distinguished professor and doyen of yoga. It's a wonderful opportunity to share thoughts, and it's a great occasion, the International Yoga Day. In fact, by organizing this series of webinars, you are doing yeoman service to the community, to the academia, and by keeping the theme as the Mahabharata and the Indian thought, Indian philosophy, deep spirituality, it is all the more important for us to think, learn, share, get together, exchange, interact. As was said, I am more of an administrator than a professor, a recent convert to the world of academia, but I have been practicing yoga and meditation for the last 15 years or so. And I'm a deep follower of Paramahansa Yogananda, about whose teachings I will speak, but I will also speak generally on whatever I know about the theme. The Yogananda Center for Theology at Shoolini University has come up recently. And we had the privilege of having Professor Balaganpati as one of the speakers in one of the webinars we organized. And he spoke very deeply and well on the science of spirituality and philosophy. And in fact, it is a wonderful exchange through our university, through your university and department, and then the S. Vyasa University, all universities getting together to speak and share and learn from each other and inspire young scholars, hopefully, to take forward the mantle. Because ultimately, the life is a relay race. People come and go. They pass on the baton. Nobody's here forever. Nobody's here for permanence. And the bigger picture of life says that we are actually here for a very short journey. We better make the most of it. And Paramahansa Yogananda ji, about whose teachings I will speak, exemplified that by telling us very deeply through his autobiography, which most of you may have read or heard of, that life is not about short-term goals or material success. I will read a little bit from his writings. But before that, let me just clear the context. Paramahansa Yogananda ji went to the US as a 27-year-old in 1920, which is 101 years ago. At that time in the West, nobody had heard of yoga. A dark-skinned individual, short and stocky perhaps, with long hair, was unheard of in post-World War I US. People were askance when they saw him on the streets. Children would laugh at him. Of course, Swami Vivekananda had been there in 1893. And at that time, or 1894 perhaps, at that time, Paramahansa Yogananda ji was just born. And there is a deep link because one individual from America met Swami Vivekananda ji and asked him, he said, "Will you be my guru?" He was so impressed by Vivekananda ji's talk. And Vivekananda ji said, "Your guru will come later." And that guru at that time was only 1 year old. But Paramahansa Yogananda ji came to America in 1920 and many followers were converted to his school of thought. His talks were very popular. There are pictures in the autobiography of a yogi and elsewhere of about 2,000 people or more in one packed hall in the 1920s. And it defies imagination as to how an individual from India who spoke with a Bengali accent, but spoke impeccable English, could sway American-minded people who were really not thinking of spirituality in those very materialistic times towards yoga and meditation. A large number of followers came in. His book, The Autobiography of a Yogi, which was published in the 1940s. In fact, this year we are celebrating the 75th anniversary of that book, has been now translated into over 50 languages. And across the world, about 90% of the world's population can read that book in their own language today. The teachings of the Guru and why it's important today on the International Day of Yoga, why it's important for us to talk about it, even in the context of the Mahabharata, which has been mentioned. is that he talks of the inner battle. He speaks of the inner conquests. He speaks of inner victories. He speaks of the voice within. He speaks of how we must conquer our own demons and fears and worries. And this cannot be done just by determination or willpower. It can be done by scientific methods of yoga, meditation. And he writes in his wonderful book, in fact, it's a compilation of his writings, Man's Eternal Quest, which is a trilogy, a part of a trilogy of books based on his lectures. And the topic of this lecture is the topic of my talk today. He spoke on the universality of yoga. In 1944, at Self-Realization Fellowship Temple, Hollywood, California, he said, yoga is a system of scientific methods for reuniting the soul with spirit. We have come down from God and we must reascend to Him. We have seemingly become separated from our Father, and we must consciously reunite with Him. Yoga teaches us how to rise above the delusion of separation and realize our oneness with God. The poet Milton wrote of the soul of man and how it must regain paradise. That is the purpose and goal of yoga, to regain the lost paradise of soul consciousness, by which man knows that he is and ever has been one with spirit. The world's various religions are based more or less on the beliefs of man. But the true basis of religion should be a science that all devotees may apply in order to reach out to our one Father, God. Yoga is that science. The practice of a science of religion is imperative, he says. Different dogmatic isms have kept mankind divided. Although Jesus pointed out, if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. Unity among various religions may be brought about only when the individuals who practice those religions become actually aware of God within. Then we shall have a true brotherhood of man under the fatherhood of God. Of course, Paramahansa Yogananda often uses the term Divine Mother for God. And even in our prayers, we sometimes say Heavenly Father and sometimes we say Divine Mother. And he talks of the Divine Mother aspect of God as being more loving and more approachable, perhaps. And in the same writings, I'll just read a couple of more paras from there. On the topic, yoga converts theology to practical experience. As Professor Bala very rightly said, Shoolini's Yogananda Center for Theology is probably the only one in the country at the moment. But the experience of yoga and practical experience of the Almighty is obviously superior and more important and all-important compared to theology. Yoga enables man to perceive the truth in all religions. And the word here, the key word is perceive. The 10 commandments are preached in various words in every religion. Of course, he was speaking in America. But the two greatest commandments are those emphasized by Jesus. Love the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul and with all thy mind. And thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. And he explains, loving God with all thy mind means withdrawing one's attention from the senses and giving it to God, giving to Him one's whole concentration in meditation. Every seeker of God must learn to concentrate. A prayer that one utters while at the same time thinking of other things in the background of the mind is not a true prayer and is unheeded by God. Yoga teaches that in order to find the Father, it is first necessary to seek Him with all one's mind, with concentration that is one-pointed. Some people say that the Hindus are more adapted to the practice of yoga, that yoga is not suited to Westerners. Now is the universality aspect. This is not true. Many Westerners are at present in a better position to practice yoga than many Hindus are, because scientific advancement have given Westerners much free time. So in today's era, I doubt that anyone has free time. They have to set aside time for priorities. India should more and more utilize the progressive material methods of the West to make life freer. And the West should take from India the practical metaphysical methods of yoga, whereby every man may find his way to God. Yoga is not a sect, but a universally applicable science by which we can find our Father. Yoga is for everybody, for the people of the West as well as those of the East. One would not say that the telephone is not for the East just because it was invented in the West. Similarly, the methods of yoga, although developed in the East, are not exclusively for the East, but are useful to all mankind. Whether a man is born in India or in America, he someday has to die. Why not learn to die daily in God like St. Paul? Yoga teaches the method. Man lives in the body as a prisoner. When his term is over, he suffers the indignity of being thrown out. Love of the body is therefore nothing more than love of jail. Long accustomed to living in the body, we have forgotten what real freedom means. Before creation existed, there was cosmic consciousness, spirit or God, the absolute, ever existing, ever conscious, ever new bliss, beyond form and manifestation. When creation came into being, cosmic consciousness descended into the physical universe, where it manifests as Christ consciousness or Krishna consciousness. Paramahansa Yogananda often used the analogy of the battle within the Kurukshetra within. Since we are on a overall theme of Mahabharata, just to spend a couple of minutes on that. So he, in his wonderful interpretation of the Bhagavad Gita, which is titled God Talks with Arjuna, he interprets the battle as being the battle between the forces of the Kauravas and Pandavas within each human being. And he speaks of Sanjaya as that introspection, which can see, which can truly analyze the forces on both sides. And he says that sometimes the Kauravas win the day and sometimes the Pandavas win the day. The fear, worry, anger, negativity, hatred, which is represented by the forces of evil, and the balance, calmness, maturity, let me use a modern term, emotional intelligence, and those qualities which are positive, cheerful, helpful to others, compassion, care, love, all these qualities represent the good forces. And that Kurukshetra within is what has to be won. But he also goes on to emphasize that it is not only by right attitude, by leading a good life of helping others, by being a good human being, that you can win this battle. Yoga and meditation is the key. And he also goes on to describe Kriya Yoga, which is used very often in not only the autobiography, but has also been mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita by Lord Krishna. And he says as a Kriya Yoga method, he says the life of an advanced Kriya Yogi is influenced not by past effects, by effects of past actions, but solely by directions from the soul. The devotee thus avoids the slow evolutionary monitors of egotistical action, good or bad, of common life, cumbrous and snail-like to the eagle hearts. And just to ponder over this for a minute, being a good human being without yoga and meditation is an incomplete life. You can be having good karma. You can evolve slowly over many lifetimes that way. And perhaps he gives the figure of 1,000 lifetimes, where you, being a good human being and living an orderly life with the right attitude, will lead you to God in 1,000 lifetimes. but by practicing yoga and meditation, hasten the process of evolution. He says the superior method of soul living frees the yogi, emerging from his ego prison. He tastes the deep air of omnipresence. The thraldom of natural living is in contrast set in a pace humiliating. A pace of 1,000 lives is a pace humiliating to the soul. Confirming his life merely to the evolutionary order, a man can command no concessionary haste from nature. And here he's talking obviously about 1,000 human lives. And when does one become a human? After billions of lives of various organisms. And then he's saying that no concessionary haste can be achieved from nature at that rate. Though he live without error against the laws that govern his body and mind, he still requires, he says, 1,000,000 years of masquerading incarnations to attain final emancipation. However, the telescopic methods of a yogi, disengaging himself from physical and mental identifications in favor of soul individuality, are therefore commended to those who eye with revolt 1,000 years. This numerical periphery is enlarged for the ordinary man who lives in harmony not with nature, let alone his soul, pursuing instead unnatural complexities and offending his thoughts and body the sweet sanities of nature. For him, 2 times 1,000,000 years can scarce suffice for liberation. The thought here is so pure and beautiful. Without yoga and scientific methods of attainment of self-realization, which is the ultimate goal of mankind, leading an orderly good life is not enough. Leading a disorderly life with totally wrong priorities of material wealth and success is totally not enough. If we look, if I can speak in my own language for a minute, if we look at the most powerful man in the world, we look at the richest man in the world and the most famous man or woman in the world, happiness is limited, fame is limited, power is limited, time is limited, and wealth is definitely limited. The richest men in the world, Bill Gates and Jeff Bezos, unfortunately separated from their wives. If the richest man in the world cannot, if I can use a very casual term, keep his wife happy, what is the life about then? What about power? I know this is a public platform, but Mr. Donald Trump in 4 years did not really smile during his most powerful tenure. Barack Obama was different. Joe Biden is probably better than Mr. Trump. The point is the most powerful man in the world also does not achieve success, which is true happiness. And fame is so fleeting that we don't even need to talk about anybody who is famous today and gone tomorrow. Paramahansa Yogananda says, identifying himself with a shallow ego, man takes for granted that it is he who thinks, wills, feels, digests meals, and keeps himself alive, never admitting, and this is one of my favorite words or phrases from the autobiography, never admitting through reflection, bracket, only a little would suffice. Thoda bahut to soch lijiye us taraf. That in his ordinary life, he is not but a puppet of past actions, karma, and of nature or environment. Each man's intellectual reactions, feelings, moods, and habits are merely effects of past causes, whether of this or a prior life. Lofty above such influences, however, is his regal soul. Spurning the transitory truths and freedoms, the Kriya Yogi passes beyond all disillusionment into his unfettered being. The world's scriptures declare man to be not a corruptible body, but a living soul. In Kriya Yoga, he finds a method to prove the scriptural affirmation. Now, inspirational writings and teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda, which I'm talking about, and I'll just conclude in a couple of minutes, they tell us very clearly for the common man. That is why the universality of yoga is made so clear. Everybody can follow it. And the universality is further extended to the three types of lives: a householder life, a monk or a monastic, a nun, or a life of service, which is the distinction made out in his writings. Anybody in any path can follow yoga, can follow meditation, can follow scientific methods to attain salvation. And yoga gives that flexibility. Nobody is required to be performing yoga, scientific meditation 24 hours a day. In the autobiography, there is a saint who has meditated for 40 years for 16 hours a day. And he says, I have done very little in life. And he says, I'm very far from God. And poor Paramahansa Yogananda at that time is a teenager, little young boy. And he is aghast. He says, what am I to do now in this life? But the point is the effort we make. So in our satsangs and talks of Yogoda Satsang Society, which is the organization founded by Paramahansa Yogananda, which also completed 104 years this year, effort is progress is the key sentence for all of us. Effort means progress. Scientific results will come. And Paramahansa Yogananda also writes, Kriya Yoga plus devotion works like mathematics. We do not see, we do not sense, we don't get report cards every 6 months. This is your score. No. One day we find our moods have gone, our calmness is high, our reactions are better. Yoga is not only, and this I don't need to say in such an elevated forum, is not physical exercises, is not, certainly not, just a way to live. It is a scientific method to attain God. And that union with God can come by the practice and experience, not by theorizing and reading and writing, although that is a great activity because we are creating awareness. The more that the young people find the path of yoga towards God, the better the world will be. And it is my firm belief that even though we're living in tough times and we are living in times which are perhaps pernicious and negative and caustic, we need to rise above, understand the bigger picture of life, and to inculcate in the youth and children the importance of yoga, the importance of meditation. And I'll end with a short incident in fact, it's a practice in our toddler school run by my wife, Nina. And she makes these toddlers sit down for 5 minutes for meditation. Of course, they do yoga pranayam also. And they sit for 5 minutes for meditation as 3 to 5 year old children. Even though they might be naughty, opening their eyes, looking at each other, smiling, giggling, but they know this is time for meditation. It becomes a part of their lives at the age of 3, at the age of 4, at the age of 5. And I would like to urge all the practitioners of yoga in India through your forum or whoever listens to focus not only on the physical aspects of but the true inner aspects of yoga as well. The body is only prepared for meditation by yoga. It is prepared. Physical fitness is important. We cannot be meditating through a broken microphone, as Paramahansa Yogananda writes. Microphone has to be in good shape. Yoga is the key. And then we meditate, and that is the purpose of life. That is why how we balance our body, mind, and soul is the key. So it is not for me to go on pontificating. I'm just trying to bring out the points which I have learned, which I have shared now. And Paramahansa Yogananda's best favorite quotes I'll end with. One of his quotes is to be calmly active and actively calm. Now, if we look at it, it's a very simple point. All of us are dynamic, active people with smartphones and WhatsApp and Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and Clubhouse. But We need to be calm within. And actively calm is even more important. How am I at 11:30 a.m.? How am I at 1:30 p.m. every day? How am I at 7:30 p.m.? Is my mind calm anymore? Can I be actively calm by reminding myself to be calm? Maybe practice a little bit of Kriya Yoga or whatever I know of yoga. Maybe calm myself down in the middle of the peak of that busy day. Between webinars, you have 10 minutes, like I do normally, and Balaji has. In those 10 minutes, can we also find 2 minutes for meditation? Thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to have been invited. And on behalf of the Yogananda Center for Theology, Shoolini University, I'm truly grateful. And thank you. And I'm sure in future we will do many more exchanges. We will also invite your scholars to speak at Shoolini University. And it will be a privilege also to invite Professor Subramaniam and other scholars as well. Jai Guru. For now.